We're here today with Dr. Babbie Lester, founder of Mountain Sage here in Park City, Utah, naturopath, amazing transformation, inspiration to me, and someone I'm grateful to dialogue with today.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
I'm good. I'm wondering if you could just begin by talking with us about what naturopathy is.
Sure.
And then about what your philosophy is as naturopath.
Sure. So naturopathic medicine is founded on 6 principles. One is that the body knows how to heal itself, and that we, as doctors, identify and treat the cause of the illness. And the illness can be caused by something physical, something mental, something emotional, something spiritual. The other principle is prevention is the best medicine, and so truly to focus on optimizing health and wellness. Also, that nature is the best medicine, and so we use the most natural means possible first. It's a beautiful philosophy. It flows well with nature and natural flow of the way nature works, and really addresses the root cause.
You know, it's really kind of inspiring and hopeful for me to learn as someone who went through undiagnosed symptoms and didn't necessarily, I kind of wish I'd known that option was out there and that this philosophy was available. So you shared first just that's sort of the general, and then what about you personally as far as your philosophy as a naturopath?
It's very much aligned with
It's
the principles of naturopathic medicine. I truly believe that the body does know how to heal itself, and that if we can become conscious enough to listen to what our body is telling us, that all of our maladies, all of our imbalances can be corrected just by tuning in.
I'm wondering if you could talk for a moment about how you've learned to tune in as a naturopath and as an individual, and how we can, each of us, learn to tune into our bodies.
Part of a big part of our medical school in the classical Chinese medicine program was Qigong. And Qi means energy and Gong means work. And so a big part of what we did was learn how to tap into the energy flow, to the Qi flow of our bodies. And that set me off well. You know, it set me up well for learning how to feel the flow of energy in my body and where there were blockages. And then I think a huge part of my personal journey has been through daily meditation and work with the pineal gland, and truly going inward to listen to what my body is saying.
Can you tell me more about the pineal gland?
Sure. So the pineal gland, from a Western medicine perspective, sits in the center of the brain. It regulates time and light. And from a more spiritual perspective, is dimension opening. It's all about our connection with, in the Hindu tradition, the sixth, or the third eye, the sixth chakra, and it is our gateway or our portal to other dimensions. And so beginning to learn how to tune into the pineal gland really offers an opportunity to start to explore inner space and other dimensional realities.
How extraordinary. So part of what tuning in by slowing down and centering, that's related to the pineal. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
That there's a relationship?
Yeah.
Does it in some way nourish or assist the pineal in functioning to slow down? Or?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's just like exercising a muscle. We also have to exercise the pineal gland, and the more we can bring our awareness and our attention to that, the brighter it becomes.
So I'm wondering how the pineal working in this way assists you then. This is something you've just shared with us about how all of us can tune in. As that has been something you've been cultivating in yourself, have you noticed your growth and development as a practitioner in assessing and diagnosing and treating?
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I've become much more in tune with what's really happening with my patients. I feel like having that awareness allows me to feel more into what is happening on every level.
And so when you describe in the beginning some of the basic principles of naturopathy, you describe one is these different ways or roots that dis-ease can be stemming from mental to spiritual to physical. Is there often a combination, or is it typically one that's the...
There's often a combination. I think they're all interrelated, you know, and in Chinese medicine, you can't just focus on the physical. It's all connected. And so as you begin to work on the physical, the mental, emotional, and spiritual also come along, and vice versa.
I see.
Yeah.
When you're working with patients, would you guesstimate sort of the systemic or more complex symptom presentation that you see? What percent of the population is either has something systemic or complex in a way that isn't necessarily a single box?
I would say maybe 100%. Yeah, I think it's all connected. And I think anytime there's an imbalance in the physical body, ultimately that comes from an imbalance in the mental, emotional, or spiritual. And so in shamanic medicine, what happens is that there's a luminous field around the body. And that field is dynamic and alive and vital. And when we ignore the subtle vibrations in that field, it begins to work its way inward until it manifests physically. That's my understanding of it.
Certainly, I can share with you that as I've been turning around such grave medical or health issues, it has been that process, living it from the inside of, if I were to just have been given a medicine and not have been paying attention to how I'm pacing myself, how I'm taking responsibility for my use of self in the world, how I was not in balance in my relationship with myself or the relationship with my community or my colleagues, if those things weren't being examined, there wouldn't be any sustained recovery of health or rebuilding of health.
Yeah.
And it brings to mind how when we chatted the first time we met, we talked a little bit about, and I think we've been taught to sort of come in and think that somebody we come to and we say, fix it. Could you talk a little bit about what that's like to witness and how you strive to shift that to help a patient to be more autonomous in their recovery?
You know, I think with the pharmaceutical industry, there was a shift in consciousness of responsibility for taking care of our own health. So we got into a consciousness of, all I need to do is take a pill and it will make everything better. What I think's starting to happen now is that people are realizing that these pills come with consequences and side effects, and realizing that it doesn't truly identify and treat the cause. And so when people come to me, I think they understand that there will be a certain element of, let's look at your lifestyle, let's look at your diet and see what we can do to start modifying some of those so that you don't have to take a pill at all. And what that does is empower people to take responsibility for their own health and accountability for their actions.
And does that quality of involvement and commitment by the patient, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, do you notice if a person is more or less in that role of active involvement, more or less improvement? Is there a correlation?
Definitely.
Yeah. So I'm thinking also about asking you, Babbie, if you've noticed any trends or kind of consistencies or patterns. We're going through a period of awakening. This dialogue and doing it together on camera is a contribution to awakening. Is there anything you're noticing about what the body is going through as a collective, as an expression of awakening, or anythings?
Absolutely. I think with that awakening in consciousness and with the increase in vibration and frequency, what I've observed in my practice is that people are feeling more tired sometimes without cause, or they're feeling less hungry, or sometimes more hungry, or there seem to be certain trends, and it varies day by day, week by week, of people being influenced by this change. And people are beginning to notice more, they're beginning to feel more, they're beginning to intuit more. And that's happening.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. Is there just anything you would encourage folks to practice as far as self-care with those changes happening?
Yes. To drink a lot of good, high-quality water, to eat really well, to rest when they feel tired, to eat smaller, more frequent, healthy meals, to stay away from genetically modified organisms, and to eat mostly a plant-based diet, whole foods.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to note that as you were saying the drinking the water, that part of what I've recently learned, and I know you know, but maybe others might not, is that the pineal is calcified or atrophied if our water has fluoride, like from the tap. And so being aware of that high quality water is part of having that attunement in our own self, so that we know what our body needs, so we know what our inner rhythm needs to be well.
That's right.
I'm wondering if there's other thoughts that come to mind as we begin to conclude.
I think for people to understand that there is a huge shift in consciousness occurring, and to be open to it, to begin a daily practice of meditation and going within, so that they can begin to sense those changes, and really to begin to work with the cycles of the seasons, to become more quiet in the fall and the winter, to go to bed earlier, to wake up early in the morning with the spring, and to really connect themselves with nature.
Yes, I do appreciate that being something you're bringing, because I think that one of the great hopes, again, of this offering is to renew our closeness to the earth and to a rhythm that is more attuned to the earth itself. And as I listen to you speak, I really hear that as a naturopath and as a practitioner, you're aware of how important that attunement is to our well-being.
Yeah, essential.
Essential. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like we could just keep talking, but we're losing sun and we have children to pick up. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Maybe
Thank
actually
you.
we will continue. We'll continue
Outside.
outside.
Perfect.
Thank you, Babbie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, so I wanted to continue the conversation by exploring a little bit. Part of what was beautiful about meeting you is learning that you have many years worth of connection to Peru and your own experience. Could you share a little bit about how Peru has changed who you are, or what your experience has been?
Sure. There's something very sacred about Peru and about the energy in Peru, about the mountains, or the Apu. And there's a belief in shamanic medicine that every mountain has its own spirit. And I believe it was the Dalai Lama who said that the Earth's consciousness used to be centered in Nepal. And in those areas and in the mountains there, come 2012, that energy shifted to the Andes. And so now there's very powerful sacred energy in the Andes. The people in Peru are authentic, they're genuine, even though they don't have a lot materially, they're very rich spiritually. And these sacred archaeological sites offer incredible gateways and portals to healing.
That's amazing. You know, I spent a year essentially near coma, flat on my back. I wasn't able to sit up. I wasn't able to really even get a cup of water on the nightstand many days. It was like being just swaddled. And during that time, I didn't know what was happening to me. I was working as a psychotherapist, and about 8 weeks before this began, I had done a fire ceremony for transformation. And what I put in the fire to transform was a long list based on the root concept to not ever be dissociated again. And that means to be in the present moment. So this meant, in a sense, that there was so much to, that it was almost like the swaddling was a way to hold me while I felt all the pain that I had dissociated on every level of my being. And during this time, I only arose one weekend. And it was because someone who was playing a very active role in support invited me to see a film called Wisdom Keepers, about the Wisdom Keepers. And it's made as ceremony, a transmission. And I came home from the movie and I experienced about 4.5 hours of what was like electric shocks. My whole right arm was atrophied, my face was frozen, my limbs were jerking inexplicably. And I woke up the next day and I felt both physically depleted in a way that took many, many weeks to recover from, and very cleansed. About a week after seeing Wisdom Keepers, I had a dream that I was at the creek where the children were initiated, there in Peru. And I was not alone. I was with 7 others. And Jeffrey Wiem, who is a filmmaker and a celestial Paco, came down the mountain to welcome us. And so when I met with you, it was percolating within me, what does that mean? There are 8 of us. And I've come to see the possibility that we 8 could be people like myself, who I was working as an entrepreneur, as someone trying to do something new, but without balance inside. And I had something undiagnosed going on. And I think that's probably not an unusual story, that many of us have things going on in our body that are undiagnosed. And many of us who are trying really hard to do something new often don't know how to do it in balance. For me, the greatest wound was around Aini. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what Aini is.
Sure. Aini is the Quechua word for reciprocity. And what that means is that my understanding is that we have to be in right relation with ourselves, with our family, with our community, and with our environment. And in right relation, things flow. If there's an imbalance, if one is taking more or giving more, it creates an imbalance. And anytime there's an imbalance, that's when things need to be corrected.
I just learned more. I didn't know that. That helps me to understand. And so I would say very much that illness has brought me into a new level of awakening.
Yeah.
And I am, in a sense, a beginner, just an awakener in some ways.
Yeah. And it's not just when you receive a service paying for it. It's also about a reciprocal flow of energy. And in Chinese medicine, there's a balance of the yin and the yang, the give and the take. And in order to truly receive, you also have to give. And in order to give, you also have to receive, so that there is a flow. And in relation to our natural environment, Aini is about being in right relation with the earth. And when we deplete the earth's resources, when we take without being mindful or being grateful, it disrupts that Aini. And the people of Peru are very deeply aware of their connection with the earth and with this flow.
Yes. So I love this word flow coming as part of what you're sharing, because essentially as I got sick, I told doctor after doctor, and no one knew what the heck I was talking about. I kept saying there's something wrong with my fluid. We have 11 pints of interstitial fluid, and the fluid was seeping through the cracks of my teeth. The fluid in my whole body became so infected that it had herpes, so that the limbs became internally, the mucosa were herped. My throat and my palate were all, it was carrying the virus as well as bacteria and other co-infections. And when I think about this question of Aini, coming from a family that was very traumatic and did not have a value system. It was not modeled as far as relationship amongst ourselves or with our environment. And I don't think that's unusual in this culture, that there's trauma and that family doesn't know necessarily about Aini.
Yeah.
And so for me, it manifests in this very strange expression of the fluids being infected. And I spent, and still spend, at least 2 baths a day. But as I began to awaken, the baths became a time of expressing gratitude to the waters and taking in the cleansing and the gift of the waters. And as that happened, I began to be aware of the waters around me. And that part of healing for me is to be mindful that right relationship is that the waters are healing me, and that I want to, in reciprocity, think about ways I can bring healing to the waters.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about this relationship between human consciousness and planetary consciousness?
So my understanding is that they're deeply connected. And a huge part of our Qigong practice was this mantra, I am in the universe is in me, I am one with the universe. And it's that concept of the microcosm and the macrocosm. And what happens with us internally also has a huge effect externally and with the universe. And in Sandra Ingerman's book, Medicine for the Earth, she talks about how important it is to be in right relationship with the earth. And that while Gaia has her very own consciousness, while the animals have their own consciousness, because we're all interconnected, human consciousness affects Gaia's consciousness. And the more conscious we become, the better it is, not just for the human species, but for the earth as a whole.
And so as I'm thinking about this upcoming trip to Peru and wanting to do it in a way that is conscious, I had thought to ask you to take a little time, a few months at least prior, to work with whatever was systemic or imbalanced, specific to naturopathy, so that the trip isn't just the suggestion that we just go on a trip and we fix it, but that this is a journey about becoming conscious. You know, I'm someone who is just awakening. I'm just learning right relationship. It's hard to forgive myself every day for the ways I don't know it, that I don't have the natural attunement that comes from, for example, some of the people of Peru who know it so, they're so attuned. But I also know that because I'm determined to learn, it's okay. And that every time I don't quite get it, I can learn and modify.
Sure.
But coming back to this trip, I'm wondering if you would be open to being a support to those folks so that the journey is grounded in teaching tools, looking at what's going on in a whole way.
Of course. Yeah, I would be honored.
Thank you. And I just wanted to share with you as well that as my pineal is coming online, if you will, as I'm learning to follow that intuitive path, and I've understood that the waters are where where I'm feeling called. You were talking about that the mountains have a spirit called the Apus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, do the waters have something like that?
Of course.
They do.
Yeah.
They have
Consciousness.
consciousness.
Yep. And that's Emoto's work.
Ah.
You know, the hidden messages of water and the healing power of water. It's the premise that every water molecule has its own consciousness and carries its own message and has its own vibration. And so really to become in right relation with water is also to honor the water as we drink it, to bless the water as we drink it, to ask the water to cleanse us and nourish us and support us in our growth. Our bodies are comprised of over 70% water, and that water is essential for our health, it's essential for our brain function, and each one of those water molecules contains energy and messages that can help our bodies heal. And if we can become very conscious about the water that we are bringing into our bodies, not only the quality of water that we're bringing, but also to become very aware of our intention of drinking the water.
That's beautiful. And what's been extraordinary for me is that so much of this healing and whatever the infection was ultimately got into my marrow. It got pretty deep in the spine and in my right arm. It's been healing through practices like that.
Great.
More than I haven't necessarily known. I don't have the body of knowledge you have about natural medicine, but I have been discovering that there is such healing available through intention.
Yes.
For me, as I mentioned, the baths and doing the baths with a sense of ceremony and reverence. And then as I started to mention, learning to follow intuitive guidance, I'm going to take a little time. This came literally out of the blue, the sense that one of the first things I'm being asked to practice as I'm learning to be in Aini with water, as I'm learning that humanity's consciousness and planetary consciousness are interconnected. The first place that I find myself being called to practice that is the White Salmon River. So I'm going to take about 4 weeks to live on the White Salmon River at the end of the year. And when I looked into it, because I didn't even know what it was, I learned that these white salmon, in 1911 they built a dam, and it took a long time, and it was a lot of violence to the waters that are their home. And they tried building a ladder, and it didn't work, and a second ladder, and so this went on for a long time. And just as the fish were recovering 100 years later, so some generations have gone by now, they blew the dam up in 2011 to make it a stream again. And so my offering, where I come from in the flow of my life, is working with transgenerational trauma and healing that from the inside out. And so my heart is with these sacred white salmon. They are here as consciousness that are holding something very valuable if we're looking at value in the sense of the sacred, being on the planet in a way that is alive and not in the way we've been conditioned, or someone like myself had been conditioned, which has to do with doing. And so I'm looking forward to having this time and spending a month dreaming at the river, dreaming with the white salmon of what it is to be them without that transgenerational trauma in the imprint of their home, their body of water, but that there was only flowing waters, as there had been for hundreds of years, only vitality and joy and sparkling, and none of the intrusion or the clumsiness. When they went to blow the dam up, they thought it was helpful to take each of these very fragile white salmon and net them and relocate them. So these fish, in a sense, speak to my own story of post-traumatic stress disorder or trauma across generations. And going to be with them seems like something I need to do, in a sense, to even regain my own health. To be with them is a kind of Aini.
Beautiful.
And so I wonder, as you work with each of the 7, if you might keep in your mind how to guide and encourage them to find their way towards what's going on that's undiagnosed in their body and what it might whisper to them about their relationship with planetary consciousness.
I think as the 8 of you begin your journey, to set your intention for healing and to spend as much time alone in nature as possible. There's an art in Japan called Shinrin Yoku, which literally translated means forest air bathing. And that is the practice of going out into nature and activating as many senses as you can. What am I feeling? What am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I tasting? What am I smelling? And to begin to just be curious about nature and if that tree has a consciousness, if that rock could speak. To become curious about what that conversation would be.
You know, I'm realizing too that I didn't share with you, but the specific journey does involve heart initiations. And so coming full circle to some of what you shared earlier about the pineal and your encouragement to listen to the rock or the tree, the consciousness of the earth, the waters. I'm realizing that as that's becoming alive for me, I'm not listening here, I'm not hearing the rock or the tree talk to me. I'm becoming aware of their sentience through the heart. And I am having wonderful communications that are rich and deep, but they're not spoken.
And I think there's a misperception of spoken. I think some people think that spoken means that they will hear actual English, you know, English words. My understanding is that when the rocks speak, when the trees talk, it is spoken in a way that is felt. Does that make sense? So that it is just a deep knowing rather than a voice. I think sometimes it can be a voice, but I think more often it's just a feeling.
And that's a wonderful shift in consciousness. You were talking earlier about how we're experiencing a great shift in consciousness.
Yeah.
And the last thing that came to mind is that I've been thinking, goodness, why did the stream have 8? And it came to me that a nonprofit, a board is made of 8. So I don't know what that means or where that might lead, but I share that with you to see if in the collective dreaming of this conversation, of the work it's opening or inviting, and the others we're seeking to generate healing with, to collaborate healing with, who will go on the journey to Peru, who will lay the groundwork with you, that there might be something there about a nonprofit concept specific to humanity and planetary consciousness.
Beautiful.
Specific to the undiagnosed being made whole through a dialogue of our own bodies and the body of Gaia.
And you know, in the I Ching, hexagram 8 is unity.
I didn't know that. So that brings one last question. Can you talk a little bit about unity consciousness? What is that?
My understanding of unity consciousness is that there has been a misperception that each one of us has our very own consciousness, and mine is separate than yours, is separate from someone else's. How would that shift if, instead of thinking that there were 7 billion individual consciousnesses, that we were one organism, almost like the aspen trees? How would that shift if we could understand that we are all connected, and that by tapping into a certain vibration, that we all begin to vibrate at the same higher frequency, And that becomes unity consciousness.
For me, the beginning is simply to even understand this concept that we are not separate, that interconnectedness is something to be part of right relationship in each choice. And I think that if that's something that I can be committed to, really holding in each choice, then I might begin to understand this incredible other octave you're speaking to of unity consciousness itself. And I appreciate your introducing it, because I do think that this journey is, again, you're talking in a quote earlier about the microcosm and the macrocosm, and that the hope is that the 8 of us in our way are doing something that, if 8 is the number of unity consciousness, is a contribution to that coming more available to each of us in our awakening.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.